Today we're talking about Pope Leo XIV's first encyclical, Magnifica Humanitas, which is the AI encyclical, as it's known. So the immediate focus, or concern, I guess you could say, that is at the heart of the encyclical has to do with the phenomenon of AI. But as we can see from the title, something like Magnificent Humanity, or the magnificence of humanity, that really the encyclical is concerned with, as he puts it, a safeguarding of what is human. It's a really interesting document in a number of ways. It's fairly lengthy. He spends a lot of time not directly talking about AI explicitly, but that has to do with the fact that the AI reality is so pervasive, or it can touch on so many aspects of human existence, that the encyclical ends up being a rather comprehensive look at what it means to be human in society. And so in that way, the encyclical places itself very consciously in the tradition that was initiated by Leo XIII with Rerum Novarum. Pope Leo XIV sees himself as, in a way, recapitulating and furthering the social teaching of the Church that his predecessor, Leo XIII, 130 years ago, had initiated.
That's how I think he sees his entire pontificate, because he said, right when he was elevated back in April over a year ago, he's picking the name Leo, not necessarily forgetting about the previous Leos, the other 13 Leos, but he has precisely in continuity of Leo XIII and the influence of his encyclical, Rerum Novarum. I think we've all expected this encyclical for a while now, because he basically has said that's what he's got his mind on. Leo's addressing was then the later part of the Industrial Revolution, and he's saying now we're entering, he said this at his elevation, we're entering something like a new Industrial Revolution, an AI-oriented revolution. So we've been expecting a social encyclical that has something to do with AI, right, ever since he became the Pope.
Well, just as a kind of overview of the encyclical, we should say, he presents us with these two striking biblical images up front, a kind of two possible futures for humanity. One good, one bad. One has to do with, the bad one has to do with the image of the Tower of Babel, that humans increasingly see themselves simply as cogs in a great machine that are involved in this project ultimately of a kind of pride and power, and technologically oriented at its heart, versus the image of Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. Humans involved as a community in an important task, an important work that's ultimately in service of God, but as a result, for the good of themselves.
Rebuilding the city of God, right?
That's right.
It's not just a coincidence that it's Jerusalem. The city of King David.
And so after these two images are presented, which are very striking, it's a great hook, he gives us a brief history of the social teaching of the Church, starting with Leo XIII, through the more recent predecessors.
Not too brief though, right? The whole first chapter, it's probably 20 pages or so. He's going through every encyclical, starting with Leo, as you said, right? Every encyclical that has commemorated the anniversary, or an anniversary of Rerum Novarum, and anything that could be thought of as bearing on the social teaching of the Church. It's kind of it's remarkable, I thought, for its sort of synoptic character, right? And it's a grand perspective. Encyclicals or letters, papal letters that I'd never even read or heard of, right? Including the Vatican II documents.
It's one of the effects that has is to emphasize for us just what a great body, as in large body, of teaching the social doctrine of the Church amounts to. Especially given the fact that it's only about 130 years is the stretch of documents that we're looking at. And then, to continue in this sort of magisterial vein that you're talking about, he turns from history to a more systematic overview of a comprehensive delineation of the principles of the Church's social teaching. Incredibly valuable. And it's only after that second chapter that we get into the real topic of the day, which has to do with the grandeur of humanity, the presence of AI, the possible great dangers involved in AI, and then the proper response. Maybe we could start with talking about the tone of the encyclical a bit. Something that struck me here was that throughout the whole document, one contrast maybe with especially, say, some of the encyclicals of Leo XIII is that the encyclical does not have what you might call a strongly authoritative tone to it.
Yeah, right. It's very gentle in some ways.
It's very
I mean,
gentle.
It's insistent. But you see the language of discernment, discerning together about things, right?
Yeah.
And that we're not trying to interfere or stifle innovation or prevent progress, become Luddites, right? But there's all this, but there's a but. And that's most of the encyclical is explaining the but, if you will.
Yeah. I wonder if part of the reason, so on the one hand, just the language of the church over the last 20 years has been much more like this, right? Especially Pope Francis' pontificate, you could say there's a way in which, but starting with earlier popes too, the language of proposals rather than imposition.
Yeah.
But more particularly to this document, insofar as Leo XIV sees himself as trying to help humanity safeguard itself, it seems like the strongly authoritative voice could be exactly counter to what he's really trying to do. He's trying to make a kind of appeal here, like, look at this danger.
Yeah.
Look at the threat here. Can we please alert ourselves to what the wisdom of the church has to offer?
Yeah, he's trying to enlist everyone, right? In other words, he addresses Catholics and even Christians more broadly, and at several points, he says, this is at the end directed to anybody of goodwill, right? So he's trying to, if you will, build an alliance, right? Not an alliance against AI, but an alliance that sort of realizes that we all have a kind of responsibility for what happens next, right? And we have the responsibility to have thought deeply enough about this matter, about this new technology, and to then make responsible choices about what will make it a tool for the good versus a tool that will lead us towards the Tower of Babel again.
So moving to the images then, the two biblical images at the outset, what did you think of those as a way into the issue here?
Yeah, they were clever. It's and the contrast was really impressive. I have to admit, I've always found the Tower of Babel episode in Genesis very cryptic, right? It's only maybe 10 or 11 verses long, and I thought in several ways, whenever I would read it, I would think, it's not clear exactly what they're doing wrong here. But at the end of the day, I started to realize that makes it an appropriate foil, I think, for what, or a comparison for what he's talking about here, because he's not saying the AI itself is wrong, right? But that when he makes the contrast with the story of Nehemiah and the rebuilding Jerusalem, he points out the absence of God in the Babel story. And that's sort of what he's stressing as one of the main dangers of AI. If we're going to build a city that's not a city of God, right? That it's a city of man that's built upon our self-absorption and our working together mindlessly towards building something greater and greater with its height in the heavens, not a trying to get us to God, right? But just we're going up to the heavens. We are becoming gods or conquering heaven in a way. I thought it's a kind of an impressive image.
Yeah, that's one of the striking things there is that, as you say, especially in contrast with Nehemiah, it's a city of man and yet God-like.
Yeah.
Which is makes it a very direct, kind of perfect contrast to something like a temple.
Yeah.
Which is being rebuilt, which has everything to do with God, but involves human creativity and thought and labor and sacrifice and community within itself.
Yeah.
So there may be sort of perfect opposites in that way.
Yeah. And I think it's speculated that the Tower of Babel, to the extent that people could identify what culture or cultures it came from, they think it might have been an attempt at building an enormous ziggurat, which I think would be a temple, but it's a temple to a pagan god. And certainly you don't get the impression there's any reference to God in the story as it's told in Genesis. Not so much that we are trying to reach God, but we are trying to get as high as God, right? Build a temple that or an edifice that grows and grows without limit.
Yeah, so So two things are brought up there that he ends up spending some time on in the document. One is the without limit aspect, right? So this thing is simply meant to go up to the heavens, and the implication is there need be no end. And so Pope Leo ends up spending quite a bit of time on the reality of limitation and finitude in human life, and the way in which that's there's something important and positive about that. Versus a view of humanity that would seek to simply abolish all limitation. And the second thing is the language issue. He's very attentive to the fact that it was this one single language that, of course, God then interrupts and multiplies. Why, for this document, the emphasis on this unitary language and the problem? And does it have to do with the digital as this new revolution?
He certainly makes that comparison at one point, at least, right? Whether it's a digital language or not, he says something like that. He throws in that phrase. So I have to admit, when I first read it, I thought it was that he was just focusing on that part for the sake of using it for comparison with digital language, right? But he also stresses, and this is something I sort of puzzled over a bit, but he stresses the homogenizing character of that. He sees both what is being done in Babel, and it's sort of a stretch to see it in the text of the story of Tower of Babel, but maybe he's using the unity of language as an image for the homogeneity of the people that are involved. They become interchangeable cogs, right, in building this giant tower. He's saying, likewise, with AI, the people who are designing it are essentially being tempted to treat human beings as interchangeable objects, as things rather than as people, right, with a kind of infinite dignity to them, treating them as means rather than as ends, as St. John Paul II would say, right? And that homogeneity maybe is what is analogous to the unity of language that he speaks about at the beginning of the story of Tower of Babel. Does that sound right to you? Because I really wasn't sure what to do with it.
Yeah, it was hard to see. He certainly wants to juxtapose this homogeneity to a diversity that's representative of the diversity of creation as a whole, which is something God intends. And that the people of God are, you think back to the Acts of the Apostles and Pentecost, right? That's gifts. One thing that's stressed there are the different gifts.
We're Parthians, we're Scythians,
exactly.
Right? Et
cetera. But I agree with you that it's an interesting interpretation of the Babel story to kind of focus on that. And it's not to say it's not there in the story, but it's maybe an interpretation that you would only, likely you might only come to in thinking about a much later problem, like the one we have right now.
Yeah, because it is clear in the story of the Tower of Babel that their strength comes from their ability to communicate well, right? Because the story of Tower of Babel begins by people have started to be scattered throughout the world. After Noah, God has commanded them to just fill the earth, spread out, right? And it sounds like people are doing that. And then a group says, well, let's gather together, right? So that, we can make a name for ourselves across all the earth. So they're sort of already opposing the divine will of filling the earth, right? By rather concentrating us here. Because we all have one language, we can actually work together, and we can become the great among all the people who have themselves become scattered. And of course, at the end of the story, the languages are multiplied, and then they're scattered forcibly, as it were, or out of necessity. Right? The ones that speak common language, a common language will go there. Those who speak another common language go there, etc. Right? So,
yeah, that's interesting. So thinking back to the initial command to fill the earth and subdue it. The notion of subduing the earth, of being stewards of the earth, of being in touch with and in some way employing the earth for a greater good. Superficially, it could seem like one part of that project is occurring in the Tower of Babel story, right? Because you see humans using their thought and and the resources of the earth to do something. But your point is that it's in a kind of notable way in contrast to the movement that God has asked for. And I suppose you could maybe say this too, that the Tower of Babel story is, in a certain way, less of a problem than what we're seeing with AI right now, because it is this group of people who's deciding, okay, let's get together and through our efficiency of language and communication, build this monument to ourselves, essentially. And yet it doesn't necessarily seem to be the case that the rest of the human race is involved one way or the other. Whereas Pope Leo is really stressing here that when it comes to the digital revolution and AI, this is something that's almost instantly going to affect the entire world, right? Because of the globalization that's occurred over the last few hundred years.
Yeah, I guess that's right. And so there's this sense of, unlike the story of the Tower of Babel, in the story that the Pope is telling about current events or future events, is the worry is that the rulers of the tower are tempted to be ruling the earth, or they are implicitly affecting the whole world, right? The changes they're causing in the culture, right, they have a blast radius that encompasses the entire orb, right? Affects our lives in many ways. Many ways for good, right? But potentially for evil as well. And so those are the things that we need to be aware of, right? But does this seem right? The Pope's not worried. Pope Leo is not worried, as far as I can tell, about the science fiction type threat of AI. He doesn't spend a lot of time about worries that the computers will rule us or something like that. But he is saying that the designers, whether intentionally or not, and very often not intentionally, are setting something that sort of grows by itself. He even uses the language of, it's not even fully understood how AI develops, right? How it gets better. And so it's out of control in a way, but the fact that we know that suggests that the way we have designed it, we've designed it so that it can't proceed in a rational way. It's going to proceed according to its own inner constitution, right? Not that it's malicious or it's something from the Terminator or something like that, but that it's something that is, because it's out of our control, it can't be ordered towards the common good except by just sheer luck, right? Because we haven't designed it in such a way to serve the entire world.
Yeah, he's really big on the notion of a kind of transparency when it comes to those who are involved with AI at all levels, right? There's the more immediate headline type stories that have to do with transparency, like, oh, look at we got these algorithms, and it takes a documentary to alert us to the way in which these algorithms are kind of secretly
influencing our habits, right? Producing addictions, etc.
Right, but there's also just at a kind of even higher level, yes, transparency regarding what it is, and how it works, and what you might expect of it and what not, given the kind of thing it is.
Yeah.
And so that's sorry.
Got that.
Yeah. It's an opportune time to plug the little mini series that our colleague Michael Agros gave on AI, where he really kind of investigates this question as to what kind of thing AI is, especially in comparison with something like human consciousness or soul.
Yeah. And I should add, Pope Leo has a relatively brief paragraph on, maybe it's a couple of paragraphs, but he's pretty dismissive about the idea that AI actually is becoming self-aware or is going to become self-aware. In fact, maybe it's worth reading to you. It's a great little passage. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. So in paragraph 98, it says it's not possible, paragraph 99 actually, it's not possible to provide a single comprehensive definition of AI. What can be stated, however, is that we must avoid the misconception of equating this type of, in quotation marks, intelligence with that of human beings. These systems merely imitate certain functions of human intelligence. In doing so, they often surpass human intelligence in speed and computational capacity, offering tangible benefits across many fields. Yet this power remains entirely tied to data processing. So-called artificial intelligences do not undergo experiences, do not possess a body, do not feel joy or pain, do not mature through relationships, and do not know from within what love, work, friendship, and responsibility mean. Nor do they have a moral conscience, since they do not judge good and evil. They do not grasp the ultimate meaning of situations. They do not bear responsibility for consequences. They may imitate language, behavior, and analytic skills, or even simulate empathy and understanding, but they do not understand what they produce, for they lack the effective, rational, and spiritual perspective through which human beings grow in wisdom. So I think those are all things that I think Michael Agros in his video series demonstrates very thoroughly, whereas the Pope sort of sets it out as conclusions, that intelligence, the word intelligence is being used in an equivocal way here. It accomplishes what intelligence can accomplish, and does it better very often, mostly, maybe we'll say. But
or certain acts of intelligence.
Yeah, certain acts. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
but it doesn't understand what it's doing. It doesn't understand anything.
Right. So that's the notion of, use that phrase, it imitates aspects of human intelligence.
Yeah.
And because it's only an imitation, it can do certain things in a much faster way, or to a greater level, right? But that's partly because it lacks so much of what fully human intelligence is and involves. There's another interesting, you remark on the fact that he's not fretting over these future sci-fi type possibilities. Something else put it this way, it seems like his real concern has to do with what humanity can lose within itself, rather than what AI might do to us.
Right, exactly right. Yeah.
Right. So like, I was struck by one passage where he says, he's talking about the phenomenon of especially young people maybe interacting with AI and forming a kind of unhealthy relationship with it, predicated on some of its ostensibly personal ways of relating and so on. And he says, the real danger isn't that the human person might think that they're interacting with another person. It's that the human person is going to lose a sense for what it is to have a personal relationship, a humanly personal relationship in the first place. And I thought that was a really interesting way to put it, as if to say, okay, yes, there are going to be things on the other side, things on the AI side that resemble humans, and things that maybe don't resemble humans so much. But in light of the human-like things that are there, the human user might be deceived. And yet, the greater problem would be for the human user to cease to be capable of actual communion with other humans.
With other people, or even cease to be interested in interacting with other human people. The more you think of I think even rightly, as long as you rightly understand that the AI is not itself a person, and yet you find you get whatever you want out of them, whether it's sympathy, or maybe even if you've got some kind of AI that challenges you on things, as long as you keep getting that kind of feedback, if you will, or connection, if you want to call it that, with the AI, you might start to think of your interactions with other human beings as the same kind of thing. That is, my interaction with this person is instrumental towards getting something out of them, right? Whether it's, again, affirmation or even constructive criticism or something like that. You start to not think about people as other people, as the object of your own contemplation and love, right? But rather as a resource to be exploited, right?
Yeah, and to that extent, it's almost inevitably going to be the case that they're going to come up short of what ChatGPT or Claude is.
Because they're better in some ways, right?
We're just much less efficient, and we're not constantly there at the beck and call of another human user who's oriented toward us in that way. Okay, well, let's take a step back again and think about those initial chapters. We kind of toggle back and forth a bit here. But we get this history of the Church of Social Teaching, and then an outline of the fundamental principles regarding the Church of Social Doctrine, and maybe to focus on the latter a bit.
Yeah.
It might be, as far as I can tell, it might be the first encyclical. I mean, we have it in the Catechism and other places, but it might be the first encyclical where there's an actual summation.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mini summa
Yeah.
of the church's, the principles of the church's social teaching.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an actual list, right? He even counts them off for you, right? He doesn't say these are the only ones, right? But he counts off, I think, 5 principles.
So what do we have? We have first, is it 3 kind of fundamental truths?
Yeah.
And then 4 or 5 principles.
Yeah, so he speaks of the foundations of social doctrine as the human person as being made in the image and likeness of God. The second one is the equal dignity of all human beings. And the third is the supreme value of human rights, right? And there he speaks at length about the natural law. But then after that, those things, right? If you can sometimes he sort of summarizes those 3 by speaking about human dignity or something like that as being you might say, the bedrock principle. After that, he gives, I think, 5. I think that's right. So the importance of the common good as the goal, the universal destination of goods, subsidiarity, solidarity, and social justice. Right? And he goes through each of those after he lists them in a very orderly way. He goes through each of them and gives examples and even compares them with each other. And I was very, very impressed at how orderly it was and explicit it was.
Yeah, so it's really helpful to see that by starting with the priority of the person as in the image of God and as bearer of dignity and rights, because we're made in the image of God, then we go to, from a sort of social perspective, what is the end, the common good, and then sort of something like the means, the right means,
the ways to accomplish
achieve
the
that
final
end,
good,
right? That they'll involve the consideration of subsidiarity, solidarity, and social justice. And one of the things that struck me there is just that subsidiarity and solidarity are, at least those explicit terms and the conceptuality accompanying them are fairly recent notions within the life of the church. Isn't that right?
I think it's right. This is as far as terms go. But and the way he puts it, I thought was kind of nice. It reminds me of some of the things that the founding fathers of the United States stress a lot. The subsidiarity, at least in particular, thinking about the idea, the way Pope Leo understands that is, if a lower level authority or institution within society could handle a particular issue, right, whether solving a problem or just accomplishing a particular good, right, it should. That is, a higher level should not interfere or try to make it be done from that higher level, right? It's a bit like the way we've got our federal government and our state governments in the United States, right, where if something could be handled at the state level rather than the federal level, it should be handled at the state level rather than the federal, right?
And that goes back to, a kind of fundamental truth about human beings. You see it in natural law, though to some degree you even see it stretching all the way back to some of the ancient thinkers, Aristotle, right? Namely that it's a real perfection of humans to be able to participate in their own self-governance. That's part of what distinguishes us from the rest of the animals.
That participation itself, I think St. Thomas will say, is distinctive of the human being, because he could rationally rule himself even by submitting to an appropriate authority. That's being a free and rational act, right? He's participating in self-governance in that respect.
So it's not as though subsidiarity is an entirely new thought, right? But rather it's a way of expressing a truth that's especially important when thinking about social matters. Whether that be governmental structures or structures within a corporation, and the way in which that self-governing aspect of the human has to be attended to.
I think that's right.
And similarly, solidarity. One of the ways that so I think John Paul II is the one who really brought that term into being part of the common lexicon of the church. One of the ways he puts it in, it might be Centesimus Annus, is to say that solidarity is a kind of social name or social version of friendship. right? It has to do with the kind of friendship that one has for another human simply insofar as it's another human within society.
Yeah.
And so you don't have everything that a friendship in the full-blooded sense, like my best friend or something like that, brings to the table, but that there is a reality to a certain kind of affection and concern for another simply insofar as that other is a human being.
Yeah.
That we want to give a name to.
So it's a social kind of friendship. I mean, obviously, all friendships are in some sense social, but it's casting the net much broader than your immediate vicinity, right? Yeah. I think the way Leo stresses it, it's particularly sort of the recognition of the brotherhood of all mankind, brotherhood, sisterhood, right? Such that he even says at one point, solidarity without subsidiarity is dangerous, and subsidiarity without solidarity is dangerous, right? They're complementary principles. The way he puts it, this is at paragraph 73, says the close link between subsidiarity and solidarity thereby becomes evident. It is thus clear that there is an intimate link between subsidiarity and solidarity. When subsidiarity is not linked to solidarity, it ends up becoming merely the protection of particular interests. I think he's sort of thinking, if I think my domain of authority is over here and yours is over there, right? That's, if you're like the higher up, you're the king and I'm the local bureaucrat. If I'm sort of holding on to my authority and you're holding on to yours, that sort of if that's as far as it goes, there can be a kind of tension between us as a result, right? Even maybe not a class warfare, but a sort of a warfare based on authority, respective authority. And then he says, but when solidarity is not supported by subsidiarity, it degenerates into a form of welfare that does not foster responsibility, right? So if we just have that sense of the brotherhood of man, right, without a sense of subsidiarity, we can sort of expect everyone to take care of us, right? That's where the welfare business, I think, comes from. You no longer take responsibility for things that are within your own control, right? Which subsidiarity should motivate you to take responsibility. It's almost like the difference between duty and rights, I suppose you might say, right? Focusing on subsidiarity, if you're focusing on your rights, right? Whereas if you're focusing on solidarity, you're sort of maybe it's both. It's hard to see if they're can be extricated from each other. But as long you have to hold on to both those things, your own rights, but also your obligations towards others. I was thinking solidarity can help you think about your duties towards other people.
Yeah. The elsewhere in the church is thinking on this. Earlier in the 20th century, the story of the Good Samaritan was brought up as a kind of example of solidarity.
Sure.
But I just think that's so helpful that he couched those two principles in light of each other, helping to show us the unity of this, the unity of the social teaching itself, but that's also reflected within a kind of unity of human life and the tasks we set ourselves to.
And it also sort of suggests, I'm sorry to interrupt, but how the two of them are subordinate in a way to that first principle of the primacy of the common good, if you will, right? Where they're both ordered towards the whole of the community working well in a rational way, in an orderly way, right?
That's really important, because it seems like that would be the other danger of just thinking about subsidiarity or solidarity kind of on their own, is that they could become ends in themselves almost. So, and we see that in, again, John Paul II called these the two great sort of temptations in social life, is toward a kind of atomism, individualism. That would be almost like subsidiarity taken to its furthest extreme, all by itself, versus collectivism, which is kind of a little more like that solidarity, but abstracted from any sense of subsidiarity,
which could lead to the welfare state, as he implies here.
And both of those, the collectivist mentality and the individualistic mentality, lack a true notion of the common good.
I think that's right.
But that's a phrase that's often used, sometimes pejoratively, sometimes very positively in more common language. What what is the sense of the common good that we're meant to appreciate here?
I think that's a really good question. It is true. It's the word's used often without explanation. I think maybe it's, and at one point I thought, he should take the opportunity to say most generally what a common good would be. Mm-hmm. But he actually goes into sort of what are characteristics of the common good, the political common good. But so I'll say this just to sort of throw in my 2 cents to supplement. A common good is a good that does not suffer upon being shared by multiple people, right? So in other words, it's being distinguished from a private good. So again, to make the contrast, if I have a cookie before me, there's no way we can both have the same cookie. Now you could break it up, I suppose, right? But if it's just say it's a bite-sized cookie, that's a kind of good that if I were to try to share it with you, it would become smaller. It would become a lesser good. Whereas a common good is the kind of thing, right? It's a kind of reality that does not get divided up by being shared by multiple people. In fact, you could argue it will usually, maybe always, want to be participated in by multiple people. So an example I like to give is a sunset, right? When multiple people, if I'm looking at a sunset, I don't feel like if other people see it, it kind of interferes with my enjoyment of the sunset. It's rather, that's the kind of thing that the more it's shared in, the better it is, even for me, right? Individually, right? And that's true for a story. That's true for the truth, right? And he even stresses the truth as a particularly important common good in the AI context, right? My knowledge of a truth in no way means that you can't have it, or if you start to learn it, then somehow my knowledge will be diminished or something like that.
So that would, because it seems like someone, especially using your cookie example, someone could say, well, the common good solution is to just make sure that we buttress up our resources and economy to where we can each have
our own cookie.
And that's the good, right? That's the good of society, is that all of us have the stuff we want.
Yeah.
But that would be different from the kind of thing you're talking about, because there, in my example, really we don't have a common good.
Yeah, it's not really common.
It's not really unifying because it's separate people with their own separate goods, separate cookies or whatever.
Yeah, and to throw this in real quick, just remember we did our Marx episode, 6 months ago or something. I mentioned that Marx at least had the importance of the primacy of the common good there, but and I still think that's basically true. But he has a very diminished notion of the common good, right? Such that he was just thinking, I got to have my stuff, you got to have your stuff, right? And we don't have to fight over anything, and no one's enslaved by anybody else, right? They weren't actually sharing anything. I think I pointed it out at the time that Marx, at least in the several books that we read here at the college, never actually describes a communal life, right? Once the ideal terminus of the revolution occurs, and we're actually able to now live in common, it doesn't look particularly sociable, right? It doesn't seem like the people actually partake in something together. He imagines an individual off by himself, hunting in the morning, writing poetry in the afternoon, and critiquing, he says, in the evening, right? So it's still isolated, right? It's individualistic in that respect, right?
I have the freedom to do the things I want to do.
What I want, and I don't have to labor just to stay alive anymore. That's the dream world, according to the ideal world, according to Marx.
So this takes us back to that second and the positive biblical image, right? The rebuilding of the city of God. That is a common good, because it orients us toward the common good,
the
highest common good, which is God Himself, right? God Himself, the Trinitarian God, is the common good. You might say of the entirety of creation, but especially of humans who are made in His image and likeness. And by extension, the temple, the city, is a place where all the inhabitants can come and share in the life that's ordered ultimately to the worship of God and to being in a friendship with Him.
Yeah, and the Pope stresses that Nehemiah describes how all the people, the exiles that are returning to the Holy Land, participate in rebuilding the walls of the city of God, right? Such that each of them is an active participant in making this city exist, right? And that was true back in the Tower of Babel as well. But here it seems like it's being done in an intentional and communal manner. That is, Nehemiah sits down with people and talks to them about okay, let's do this together. This is our common project, right? And he even hears difficulties from people, objections. And so it becomes a social act in a way that you don't see that in the Tower of Babel story.
That's really interesting. And presumably also there's a kind of education that's involved there.
Yeah.
He's in touch with these other people about what we're to do, and here are the various things that are needed in order to accomplish this task.
Yeah.
And it's for the good of everyone. So here's what you can do. Well, what are your gifts? What are you good at? What are your resources, and how might you bring those to bear?
Yeah.
And that seems to link up to another of the positive themes that we get toward the end of the encyclical, which has to do with education and the role of more subsidiary communities like the family and schools. And
and the diversity of skills according to those different communities or different subordinate institutions. I'll add, just because it just occurred to me, one of the curious things about the Tower of Babel story is it stresses, at the very beginning, it says, people learned how to make bricks. It's a strange little line by itself of bitumen and clay, whatever. And you get the impression, there's probably part of Pope Leo's inference is coming from, that everyone is doing the same thing. We're all putting in a brick, right, to build this giant tower, right? Whereas, as you were pointing out, there's different skills appropriate to different people, right, in the Nehemiah story, right? And such that different talents, different units of organization, right, will have different kinds of things they'll do to contribute to the good of the New Jerusalem. And it seems like that, again, maybe just goes back to the threat that Pope Leo points out, that there's this homogenizing that's coming with the way AI could be implemented, right, or the way it could grow, or the way it might dominate us.
Yeah.
Whereas one of the solutions is for everyone to be involved in directing the future of AI and how we implement it personally, how we implement it in different levels of institutions, respecting subsidiarity, right? I was struck by how, he says at several points he addresses the importance of governmental roles in this, but he also at other points says, this is not just for the government, a problem for the government to solve. It's for all of us to be facing together, educating ourselves together. And as you're pointing out, the schools are really important in this.
The schools are really important. The family is really important. And he also singles out, he's aware of the fact that it's large corporations that perhaps even more than national governments are responsible for this revolution. And so they have a particular kind of responsibility to bear when it comes to avoiding this homogenizing take on humans. And so it's worth just stressing again, I think, that we've looked at these fundamental truths involving the Church's social teaching and the principles of that teaching. This is all what he deems necessary to address this topic, because AI is something that that pervades the whole of human existence. And that in itself is worth people taking seriously. It's not just something that you might interact with either for the sake of your job or on your downtime if you're figuring out how to the next recipe for whatever, and so you ask ChatGPT. But rather, he's seen that this is going to have an effect that ripples through all strata of human society, because that's the kind of civilization that we are at this point. We're so connected that this technology isn't just one among others, but it's a sort of meta technology. Right? It will
like
involve
electricity
all
or something
technologies
like that.
within itself in some way, or touch on all of them.
I was actually, one of the things I was impressed about this is there was times I thought, okay, well, how much more is there to say? And then he'll open up he'll point out something that I already knew, I guess, habitually, but point out some other way in which AI affects our lives. And I thought, oh yeah, that's right. That's also a big part of our lives. Or even he talks about war towards the end, right? The way it's both really useful in fighting wars now. Maybe it will even reduce body counts as a result. but it also has the danger insofar as it can become somewhat autonomous, right? Of removing human responsibility and for whatever actions are done to kill people, I guess. And that could further lead to us thinking about people as just figures on a chessboard rather than people, right?
Yeah.
People that have that infinite dignity, right? That comes from being made in God's image.
Yeah, and this would all be a particularly strong version of what Pope Francis, the immediate predecessor, termed the technocratic paradigm.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a phrase, the technocratic paradigm is a phrase that's meant to describe, really you could say, a sort of entire vision or view of what human social life amounts to right now.
Yeah.
Where efficiency is a primary value.
Yeah, maybe the highest, right? Saving time, right? Which is obviously a good, but saving time for what?
Yeah.
Right? Do something faster now so that you can what? Right? All the AI, the technocratic paradigm, at least insofar as its goal is efficiency, simply allows you to pack more things into your day. It doesn't give you any guidance about what those things ought to be, right? As if that's just up to you, I guess, right? There is nothing that you should pack your day with, but you obviously should make your day hyper efficient, right? At getting through the things so that you can do the other things. As if none of those things are worth doing on your own, and even doing slowly, maybe.
And it's closely connected with the primacy of power.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see the problematic aspect of that when we think in sort of large-scale terms, especially like with totalitarian regimes, or just something like a corrupt CEO, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
But at a more local, everyday level, there's something about, there is a lure to efficiency. There's a lure to technology because of the way in which it gives us a sense of power. We are empowered in ways that we weren't 30 years ago to do all sorts of things. And that in itself seems to be something that is a temptation for us.
Yeah, it could go to our heads.
Right. And so we feel actualized or realized in some way, fulfilled.
Yeah.
And so there's the temptation is just to keep at it and to keep exerting ourselves in these ways that actually don't necessarily involve too much exertion, but give us a feeling of power. And so that we're all the more less inclined to actually take a step back and think about, what is this for? What am I really supposed to be about? What kind of thing am I?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when my kids are playing their video games and they're leveling up. They're always saying, I got to the next level, or what now? Well, obviously, go to the next level, right? And I always wonder, sometimes they'll admit it, but I rarely ask them about it, but I get the impression at times that when they get to the game, some games actually have a terminus, right? A goal. Once you get there, the game's done, and now you have maybe a moment of satisfaction, but it's hard for me to imagine how long that moment lasts.
Yeah, you'd be looking for 2027's version of the game.
The next one,
and that connects with this idea of the presence of limitations and finitude in human life.
Yeah, right. You mentioned that earlier. That was good to come back to that.
Yeah, so I thought this was a really interesting section. I had mixed feelings on it.
Okay.
So on the positive side, I was just really glad that he brought it up. It seems like something super important. The fact that, and this is something very, I guess you could say, I mean, it really comes in with the Christian worldview. And I don't know that you see it much in the ancients. Namely, our finitude, our limitation is not simply a negative.
Yeah, it's an asset.
But it is, it's there's something important to the meaning of human life and to the capacities that we have, the things we're capable of, even if that simply means a kind of dependence on another, a way of being in relation with another in virtue of a vulnerability I have or a limitation. I mean, we think of the role models that constantly and for many years we've put forth for the young, and how many of them have to do with care for another on account of some limitation.
Yeah.
I guess the negative takeaway or the negative feeling for me when reading through this section was that it seemed as though I was looking a little bit more for explicit connections to the life of Christ.
Yeah,
I mean, to
right,
the passion, Christ's sacrifice, the kenosis, the emptying of himself.
Yeah, the clear, great goodness that comes from this, only from this suffering or these limitations. Yeah.
Right.
Can I read a passage that's maybe helpful? It doesn't make reference to Christ expressly, but I thought it was kind of beautiful as far as how it relates to what you're saying. Okay. This is paragraph 118. It says, "Our relationship with life seems to be in crisis today. Everything that appears as a limit," put that in quotation marks, incapacity, illness, old age, suffering, vulnerability, tends to be seen primarily as a defect to be corrected rather than as a reality through which our humanity matures and opens itself to relationship. And yet we must remember that humanity flourishes not despite limitations, but often through them. It doesn't say always through them, but often through them, right? The light of faith offers a perspective on reality that helps us recognize what we call the contingency of things of this world. While it is right to strive to alleviate the suffering that marks human life, it's also wise to acknowledge our fundamental finitude, knowing that religious experience, and in particular Christian faith, proposes that we live without oversimplification this ambivalence between human greatness and limitation, interpreting it in light of our original and fundamental relationship with God.
Mm. Right. So it is a wonderful passage, and there is a mention there of, as he puts it, specifically the Christian life.
Yeah. But he's pointing out there that this fixation on in the technocratic paradigm, as you mentioned earlier, at looking at things that we would tend to call necessary evils, right? Things that we're all going to die someday, things like that. As the temptation is to think about those as the evils that could actually be removed and that must be removed, right?
Yes.
That they're not just necessary evils; they're absolute evils, right? And that I keep thinking of that line in Descartes' Discourse on Method, where he speaks about the goal of the new method for discovering and learning and philosophy is to become masters and possessors of nature, right? Such that, he says, ultimately it's all going to be ordered, all of our science is going to be ordered toward medicine. He says, such that we could even possibly remove the enfeeblement of old age, right, and perhaps live forever. So I'm thinking of this idea about the mastery of human limitations, the mastery of human nature, right, is not recognizing what the Pope's pointing out here is that some of these limitations are the necessary prerequisites for us becoming full human beings, right, and becoming mature, as he says, human beings, right. Going through suffering is, in the end, can be good for you, right? Can actually make you a better person, a more complete human being.
Yeah, you try to imagine someone who's, this is impossible. You imagine someone who's really never encountered suffering.
Yeah. And
what you wouldn't want to interact with that person.
Yeah, they would probably be a jerk, right?
And incapable of relating in so many important ways.
Yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful note to end on. I think there's a lot more we could say about this encyclical, to be sure. Maybe we'll return to it at some point. Thanks,
good.
Chris.
Sounds good. Thanks, John.